we have already heard that a lot of new products have been added to the Sitecore portfolio, and we have both been working with Sitecore for quite some time, the classic CMS part. Version 4 and version 3, I think we started on. So for us, it's interesting to take some of these new products and see where they go. And search is particularly interesting because I cannot think of a single project we have made where search wasn't a part of it. And yet it's first now that it's actually an integrated part of Sitecore in terms of its own answer to that. So we decided to try to take a real-life project and start converting it into a Sitecore Search. So it's a Sitecore 9.2 solution, 9.3 solution running on SOLR-based search engine. And then we would see how far we could go. And this is what we'll try to present today. If I can advance the slides. I can do like that at least. So my name is Sebastian Winslow. I am sitting in Maltech, Denmark as the CTO there. I've been MVP since 2009, and as I said, worked with Sitecore, since version 3.
Since version 3.
Yeah.
My name is Jesper. I'm also in Maltech, Denmark, tech lead, solution architect. And it was on 4, even 4.2 I was starting. So
yeah.
Okay. So.
We have a. It's fine that this one absolutely don't want to do anything.
No?
No? You can see.
Click.
Yeah.
Oh.
So first, our introduction on Sitecore Search. And we know that there are some of the product people here, so we apologize in advance for the things that we have misunderstood or not quite gotten. But we also will defend ourselves that the documentation is sparse for now. It works now? Perfect. Yeah. So first, a bit of history. We have, as I said, not really had search in Sitecore. We have had a lot of third-party solutions. Some of them still exist, some of them don't. This is not all of them, just some of them. Then Sitecore integrated. You can take the next one. Sitecore integrated, and we got the option of Azure Search, and also, next one, Lucene. Each of them coming with their own problems. Azure Search not really ever being finally implemented, I think we can fairly say. Lucene with its fun of making sure that indexes were kept in sync across multiple servers if you were in those environments. And then finally we also have the SOLR. Gotta love those Java beans. It's not really the same tech stack. It's added infrastructure that at least in many organizations were not in place capability-wise to actually leverage. So it's not that it's a bad product, it's just that it's something completely different that you need to actually handle. So, a new boy in town, Sitecore Search is a SaaS-based solution based on the experience from Discover, so a lot of knowledge has already been in place to build the product. There are extremely many configuration options, which is one of the strengths because it enables the tech team to make the business team do a lot of the stuff themselves actually. It has a role-based interface. There are a lot of reporting going on in it. It has a very rich feature set in terms of standard standard search features, but also added ones on top. There is the prediction search and then the AI-driven component of it. I will put this one down since it doesn't work in a piece. Yeah. Then I can take over here.
Yep. So there are a few different approaches on how to search your content and get your data source. Crawling is one of them. The other one we called item-based. We know from SOLR we have our items, index them. We know exactly which fields we have and when they are updated. But on the other hand, it gives this problem. I have items and I use a lot of components in my pages, So where is which pages does this content actually belong to? When I have a lot of data sources and stuff like that. And that's solved when we are crawling the actual site, and even if there's more content in the front end, in the markup, it's also taken into account. But it gives it its own challenges. What content is it that we should index? Should we have the footer text indexed on all pages to give this information? And how to update the stuff when we have changes. For Sitecore Search, crawler is a major part of this, and it's really configurable. We can see that in a moment. It can take its pages to crawl from a feed. So if you have a sitemap, you can use that directly. You can create a custom feeds to say those are the pages, the URLs that we want to crawl. Yes, it could even be another page than the real one, but of course it will give its own chances if you're having those shadow items, but it might be that there are some issues on the actual front page that you want to solve in another way. Even though it's actually rendering JavaScript, the page is rendered with your JavaScript and then can pull out the content with the extractors. There's also API push, where you can push items to this API. And even if you're crawling, you can do an incremental update to the items indexed by the crawling. You cannot enrich the content with that, as when the crawling is running again, everything is starting from scratch. So your content needs to be reachable by the crawler when you're basing that source on crawler. So you can have multiple sources, so you can have some content based on crawler and some content based on an API push in the product.
Yeah. And from a Sitecore Search perspective, it's everything but the item-based indexing that you have available up here. Yeah.
Customer Engagement Console is the name of our interface for this product. It's its own login, as we know from the other Sitecore SaaS products. There's a lot of things you can see in here. We'll list them, we'll see them in a moment. Performance about the size, about the site, and the actual pages. And let's take them. Perfect. This is an example of this site performance. You can see it within this customer engagement console. And to show that, you can see that it actually needs data about the usage of the site. And that's actually a core of this Sitecore Search product, and the behavioral search we also have seen from this cover, that the user behavior can be used to predict those searches. So the data is needed within the product, or also to have this data. Yeah. You can see visits, page views, requests, performance of the actual widgets, the places where you are interacting with the search, conversion rates when you're tracking that, and you're able to filter down what's in data, tracking data you have in here: time, device, app type, user. If you Pages and widgets. So in the customer engagement console, you set up those widgets where the user is interacting with search, where they're making their actual search. And every action is actually centered around a widget. So you can have specific rules for that widget, saying you have a search on the front page, so you have a search in an FAQ, and you have a search in a dedicated search page, and it can be different rules they're using. Maybe filtering down to something, maybe different boosting or burring rule. It's configured on a widget. And there can be variants. Here there's just one variant, but you can have several and actually do split testing and have part of the traffic going to each one of those. And we're still only in Sitecore Search. It's nothing to do with CDP or of the other products. It's a nice screenshot with no data in here. But it is possible to see whether you are tracking data in the search for the widgets and keywords and the actual content shown to the users. Yes. Catalog, we have two different types of data. We have the actual content, the documents, we will say, from SOLR that comes from a source or more sources. And each can be of a certain content type, and then you can filter down to see what's actually indexed here in the engagement console. And Sitecore Search is also working with users or visitors for this prediction and engagement. When you push the tracking into the product, a unique identifier you can control. For our site, we will use our unique identifier we already had for authenticated users. You can also use an email. You can even link to a Facebook profile. And it's actually taking into account that we might have some special requirements due to GDPR for cleaning up content. So that is possible. Can do actions under this specific user. Yeah, we have an example of some of the content we have. There's some developer resources. You will need some API keys to interact with this service. The API Explorer, where you can build requests, we'll see that in a moment. And there's this event monitor where you can follow the actions for a specific user. So it's much more than just searching content from an index. And yeah, there's documentation links there also. Here, this is called domain settings, configuration for a certain domain, for a certain site. Here, all of those are the different attributes that can be used for our content. It doesn't have to be in every document. And you can add additional, and there are a lot of different attribute types or field types we can use for that, both simple types and arrays. And,
yeah. So basically used to define the schemas that you want for the different sources. If you need new fields, you can basically add the attributes in here and then use them across.
But there's not a dynamic field, as you would know from the old days, where just suffix things. You need to actually add your attributes to the schema.
And it's also within here, when you define the attributes, that you put different features to those attributes, whether you should be able to facet on them, filter on them, sorting options, suggestion options, and things like this. So that that you all do in here. Yes, and then this is under the administration. It also have the users of the system. And one thing to note here, if you only see the users tile
option,
then it's because you don't have the tech admin role, which is the one that actually sets you up for all of this. So
we had quite some time.
The first day we looked at it, we were like, what are we going to do in here? Because we were admins, right? But admins is, I don't know where you can answer this. If admins is because all clients wants to be admins, and then you can give them the admin, and then they still don't have admin rights. You need to be tech admin to have that. Huh?
There's a business admin.
There is also a business. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. The case that we were looking on, we'll just give a little bit of context to it. It's a Danish site. It's called www.findbolig.nu, and that means find residence now. So it's a platform that is used to manage long and short-term rental of residences. It is used by private landlords. It is used by smaller companies. But moreover, it's used by big pension funds and large organizations that have big property portfolios, and they have very complex business rules. There are two different ways of renting out things in Denmark, at least. There are one type, which is basically just you make a listing and advertisement saying, I want to rent this out, and everyone can apply for it. And then you have a concept of waiting lists, where you kind of say, I want to be on a list for a residence in this property. which is owned by a pension fund, and they will have all different kinds of rules saying if you are a member, if you are a child, if you have been to our conference or whatever, then you move up the list or down the list and things like that. So there's a lot of complex business rules behind. It has several hundred thousands of users. Some of them are there for just a few months because they need a residence here now, and some of them are there for years on the waiting list. You can even be passive, so you're just there kind of earning your right to the residence in 15 years when you actually want to apply for one. The purpose of the site is to make rental residences easily available for those needing it, and the goal is to make sure that none of the residences are without a tenant, meaning that they are idling. And as Jesper also said, you can have a lot of these different widgets because search is so much more than just search on the site itself. Actually, there is not really a site search on this solution at all. There is a listing search. In the top here, there are some blue boxes. That's a whole set of facets that can expand, and then you have different things. It can be room sizes, rent, residence type, all these different kind of things. Availability, is it available in 2 weeks or in 6 months? And then the search result it can be seen by the colors. The pink ones are basically properties, so that's the waiting list, and the blue ones are adverts where everyone can sign up for it. So it's also 2 different kinds of listings here, because one is basically an aggregation of a lot of residences with a property container around it, and the other one is just a plain residence. So for those who attended search session yesterday, where it was asked, can you display differently whatever you have indexed? Yes, you can absolutely do that in your search result. You can present them in different ways. Here's an example of that. There is a lot of things going on: filtering, facets, sorting, paging, suggestion, ranking. There is mixed results. There is also the ability to flip it to map. And then random results, that's basically just that the client wanted it to be able to also feed in results that perhaps were not matching the criteria exactly, but just to inspire the applicant a bit. But then there is the front page search, which is either predefined searches. These are down here, so it is city names. So clicking on that will take you to a search which has already been filtered out, faceted out based on the location. It could also be on every other type of attribute that are on the properties. There is also on the front page a little widget that just displays new residences. So whatever is new since yesterday should turn up here. There is also one which is similar residences. So when you are looking at one, they want to expose you for a lot of residences in the same area, kind of the same price level, square meters, so forth, so that if you are applying, you're not just applying to one, even though there are applicants that only wants to live in that exactly apartment, and then, of course, this is irrelevant for them. Then there are predefined searches, search agents. Out here is a mail, so there's even being built mails sending out notifications to the users. And this is all driven by the search in the site. And there could be more. There is an FAQ. As I said, there is no site search, so that has not been built yet. But it could free text on the listing. Site search also get a featured listing, so you could pay for having your searches promoted, things like this. There are a lot of things that you could do. Okay, so now we want to move this case into the Sitecore Search framework. And it starts out by the triggers.
Yeah, so we want, first step it, we need our content indexed. And we were going for this crawler, set up if we found the easiest way for us was to set up a specific feed listing. Those are the pages that you're actually going to index. There's not a public sitemap for that on the page. If you had a sitemap with every page, that would be obvious to start that. Yeah. There's actually not, for some strange business reason, a sitemap for those pages on this side. But it is very simple to have this. It can either be a request, simple page request, finding the links, or it could be an RSS feed. It doesn't have to have all the attributes from your blog feed about the description and title and author and stuff like that. It just needs an URL, and you can go and crawl that. Yeah, sitemap. And it could even be more JavaScript.
And basically a step before this is that you define sources. So you can have multiple sources, which basically is confined indexes, right? And here you say, for this source, I want these entry points. You can have one or more entry points. So it could be that you wanted it to index 2 menu points in one source and then another one in a separate source.
You just said 2 different indexes. No matter if you're using one or multiple sources, it gets into the catalog and can be searched within a single request.
Yes.
So it's not like it's different SOLR indexes where you need different requests. One request you can search across searches.
Yes,
just
that is true.
If you think it's a SOLR index.
Yeah.
The request extractors. So on a page, on the crawler, you can define how deep would you like to crawl, find new pages. If you have a sitemap with every page, there's no need to go further. But you can enrich, there's those request extractors. The example is that you have a sitemap with all the pages, but you also want to index the PDFs on the site, even those are not in the sitemap. Then you're actually able to do that with those request extractors. We have not really used those request extractors.
We have not used this for this, but it could be instead of doing the RSS feed, if our listings had a specific class, we could have said only follow A tags with this specific class. And then we would get those.
We can say we started by indexing the listing page you saw, and that we have endless scrolling, and that doesn't really fit with this. So we have to go with the feed. And it's a really nice editor, I would say. It will show if you are making JavaScript syntax errors, and you actually have IntelliSense within. So that's really nice.
It is based on Monaco, so the same as Visual Studio code is also using. Yeah.
And document extractors. So now we are looking at the actual content that we want to have within our search index. You can have, even though it's the same source, you can have different tags on it. It's tempting to call it content types, but it is called a tag. And then you can have some rules on what content do you actually want to pull out of this page. And I think in a moment we'll see the actual JavaScript used to this, but you are able to do a lot of stuff here to pull out the content from the page and even manipulate the data. And you can have those different rules based on which page it is. There's a global expression, there's a regular expression you can use to say, should this rule apply when I'm indexing this URL?
So basically here we have 3 different extractors. We have one which is for properties, and this is when you click on something on the search page, then you go to either a property page, which is for a property with a lot of residences below it. It has to be presented in one way. Or residences, which is the specific residence. And then we have a default one which should take what's else on the side. Yeah. And they can have different ways of doing it. And this is also, if to make an analogy over to SOLR, this is a way of doing the computed fields as well, because the extractors, this is where you can say, this is the way I want to have data in my index when crawling. So here are 2 examples.
Of document extractors. Find some content on the page. Maybe you have been good and putting clear meta tags on your page. Maybe, as you'll see on this page, that we sometimes had to make some actually a bit weird selectors to find our content, but that was also possible.
And it's basically JavaScript that you're doing on this part over here. Yeah. It starts actually by taking out a small script looking at the page, trying to find the place where it says this residence or this property has residences with rooms from 1 to 6, for instance. That's just text on the web page saying this, right, in our example here. So we have tried to find that text on the page and then parsed it. So instead of saving 1 to 6, we know that 1 and 6 are the two numbers, and then we actually make an array of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so that we put that into the index.
So we can filter out, so I need a residence with 4 rooms.
This seems weird to do it like this. Probably we also wouldn't do it in a production solution. Probably this would be something that we would push in the API or make a specific field for it, but it's also just to try to see what can actually be achieved using these things. So it's a really powerful tool that you get in your hands.
And then for the actual searches on the page, there are nice APIs for this. We were struggling a bit that we need. When the account is created, we got an European account. That seems very logical. And in the documentation page, it says some of the endpoints are European, for instance, to get an access token. But this one, we were missing that we needed a European-specific one. Things made sense when we got this European-specific endpoint. So without knowing, I'm pretty sure that there's separate data centers. You belong to one place. If you need a global search, maybe you would even have 2 accounts to have one in, I assume, US and one in European to reduce latency.
Sorry.
It was more to say this. Again, we are referencing a specific widget, this RFK ID, and I suspect it's come from Reflection, the name of the company that was bought for Sitecore Discover. But there is a reference to a specific widget that was configured with specific rules. So when you're making a search, you're actually saying it's this widget that are making the search. And you will get a result back. I don't think it's that strange. The result you get back, you can have facets. Here's only one saying the content type, the tag we had. Here's then 39 properties in the total, and I asked to only get 2 back, so those are the content here, and the attributes indexed from those specific documents. That could seem a bit weird to create those requests, but there are actually a tool within the engagement console to build this. So in the developer resources, you can configure those settings. It will set up saying this is how your request should look, and you can even execute it and get the response back. We have not been along through that line about actually refining what results do we want to get back for a widget. But there are quite some configuration options for this. Boost rules, bury rules, blacklist rules. You can take specific contents items and drag in saying, I want to boost this specific one. And you can filter in the right parts to find the content you want to have a specific rule for. I could imagine those random results they have right now, saying in a certain point of time they want to promote a specific residence, a specific apartment. They could actually do it in here, the business users themselves. There are also more rule-like options here. You can say, based on a specific attribute or ranges or conditions, then you want to apply this boosting or bury rule. We've seen a lot of this. There was site performance, widget performance, page performance, and for that to make sense obvious we need the data to get into Sitecore Search. There's this event endpoint where those data should be fed into. And I struggled a bit, but we got it. This is how you make a request and you get a success back. There are there are several different, there's a context about the browser, geolocation, which page. If you have something about the user, you include this. You reference that it's this specific widget, but you also say that this action in the top, the action I was viewing this widget. There's also, you have clicked, you can add it if you have something, adding a bookmark, or you can even track that this is actually a conversion and have that show up. But you'll need to call this API endpoint to feed the data into the system. And on Sitecore Discover, there are SDKs, components. I thought we could use them. I can tell you cannot do that. There are different scopes, so it gives some strange errors. Maybe they'll be coming something. As otherwise, there's actually quite some work to create the actual components on the pages. One part is searching, the other part is actually feeding those events into the system, so to get the right tracking and performance on the page.
So up until here, it has been kind of easy to define the sources, kind of easy to make extractors, figuring out how do we want the data to look like. We can make all the API requests that we want, get the JSON back, and you all know we can take the JSON and put on our pages as we want to, but there is a lot of work in that, and that part of the SDK line which is there and to come, and it is really soon to come. I can almost promise that, right? Yeah.
We got ours.
We almost got it for this, I would say. So, but we didn't. But when that comes, even these things are abstracted away from you. You don't need to consider all of this because it's already contained in the SDK. So all this with the event triggering and things like this, you can do it, but you can also just use what is already built for you, which is, in my opinion, quite awesome. And then you might have cases where you want to do your own stuff, or there is a limitation in the SDK or whatever, and then, as we are used to from Sitecore, we can work around it, right? So that's brilliant. That's in the same line of thoughts. So
yeah, I'll say we can at least say for Discover, it's React components that are delivered. There is a storyboard where you can say, I want to have a search page or widget that looks like this, and then it will give you saying this is the snippet you use in your React source to have this search page. Yeah. Our site is based on Vue, so we would have to do a bit of triggering. Had another page for this or something like that. So obviously we are in Sitecore going much for React currently, but it is possible to pull out the major part of it. Yeah. And that was about the Discover. So we'll see about the Sitecore Search SDK when they're released.
How it is. Yeah. So what have we found out using this? So we found some issues. We have a list of requests that you can get later on, but some of them are here. But also a lot of benefits, right? So issues. First part was this with the tech admin role. We were question marks. What to do? It seemed very strange in the UI. Luckily, that's just reaching out to someone from the product team, and they know exactly what is going on. And I also do believe that this is part of, we are now moving into the place where everything is being stabilized in order for everyone to use it with ease. So I don't think this will be an issue going forward. It's just right now. It has been clear to us that the product team has been working as hard as we have tried to work on getting here.
Definitely,
so that's quite Fine. That also reflects in the UI. There are some things that are a little bit shaky. Don't try to delete your triggers unless you're ready to recreate them, because if you delete not the top one, it's still the top one that gets deleted. So there are some of these childhood quirks around in the UI. Also sometimes when you have been in under one of the menu entries, you have that context when you come back again, and it's not for sure that you want it. So that there are different things there, but it's to work around.
Common single-page application.
One thing that is a big problem right now is you don't have any logging of what is going on accessible for you. I'm sure that it exists. But basically, if your crawler fails, you just get to know it failed. And then you can try to guess what's going on. And it might be errors in your JavaScript. It might be errors in the pages that you are trying to go to. So there are some things there. As Jesper mentioned, the infinite scrolling, that's an issue. If you have pages with that, it's not supported. Documentation, there are some. Hopefully there will come more. It would be very nice to have the capability to see which jobs are actually in queue, and also to kill them off, because the way it works is that when you change things in your source configuration, then you publish it, and then you do an index on that specific version. You can do multiple indexes on that version, but it's kind of that version that you do it on. Make new changes, publish it again, then it will increase the version number, and then the next index will be on that. And I learned yesterday that all the indexes are actually available, but you cannot see them right now, but they are actually there. So you could, in theory, go back. Problem is, we figured out, because at a certain point in time we were quite confident that now everything was good, and then we increased to crawl 15,000 items instead of just 300, and everything was not good, but it took quite some time to crawl it compared to the 300 items, and we could not kill it off saying, oh, we actually know that this will fail, but we just have to wait it out. So keep it on low numbers as long as you are trying out things. There is the missing SDK, so a lot of work to be done in relation to the insights and enabling the features on the front end, but that is something that we know will come. And then one thing is also, when you take the old solutions, it's interesting to see if your markup is actually ready for the crawler to come. That also goes for when you're building new solutions, but we actually see it as a positive thing, because it kind of enforces you even more to be disciplined about the semantic markup and things like this. So it will, using Sitecore Search, if to use it correctly, would actually also improve your site quality on other parameters. And then you would get better Lighthouse scores if you are using the plugin that was presented here last session.
But still, it's way more flexible than
yes.
when if someone used DT search and you have to make specific meta tags to actually have something indexed. Yeah. Now you can actually configure it in the tool. And
even with bad markup, you can do the JavaScript to actually get the data out still. Right? Benefits, it's incredibly flexible. It's highly configurable. We have been around that. It's a SaaS solution. It removes a lot of the infrastructure from your hands. Anyone who saw the presentation with Klaus and Push in the morning knows that you move that issue to someone else than you, which is good. It's super fast. It has everything, I think, that you would want from standard search and much more. It has the insights, analytics, and not only for you, it's also for the business users, so you can actually push the challenge of making the ranking of your search results correct to the business, instead of having the business coming and saying, well, we don't really like the way that the results are turning out, can't you tweak it for us? Now they can actually see why it gets where it gets and try to tweak it themselves. And then you have the split test option also. So in conclusion, we see big potential, loads of use cases for the product. And if we pin Dave O'Flanagan to his promise from the keynote, then we are very sure that it will be a super, super strong add-on to the Sitecore solutions out there. Absolutely. This is what we had. These are our contact details. Please reach out if there is anything, and questions if there are any, if we have time for it. Yeah. Any questions?
So you
Yeah.
Yep.
What was your implementation time?
So implementation time here, it's without doing the front end part, right? So that's not there yet. But if we take away the learning, right, we had to sit down and learn some of it. It has actually been a couple of days, 3 days altogether.
If you think about that learning curve, what was that learning curve for you? Like, weeks?
No, I would also say in terms of hours, days, it's very low. The problem with the learning curve were more, we were stopped by technical issues and limitations more than, and with that I mean we had the wrong role, right? We couldn't see what was going on in the logs, so it was just trial and error a little bit. So if you get those parts in place, it will be very fast to get to the point where you can leverage this. And then of course, depending on what you want to do with the index, then it's not really, it is search, but I mean, the extractors that you have to write and all of this, that's depending on your business requirements, right? But it's basically just code, not search related as such. So my opinion would be very low learning curve when the documentation and stabilization is in place. But right now it was also a little bit pulling the hair, not knowing what was going on, right? But great assistance from the team then, right? So if you venture into it, they are there to have your back for sure.
So you said that the HTML was okay, standard, but if it was not so good, you could write JavaScript to get your extractors better. Did you ever consider using the API instead?
Yeah. Yeah, so this is what I said with the rooms also. Probably in a real world scenario with this solution, we would have pushed residence info and property info as API pushes instead, because they are very precise business objects. We use them in other contexts as those business objects, but this was in order to try to push the product to see how could we do if not just, then we would take too much of the search out of it, basically. And that's because a lot of it is already handled by the product behind the scenes, right? So, but yes, it's not that it was not the best practice example. It was trying to see how it works. Yeah.
Any other questions?
You're also welcome to reach us, out to us.
Yeah. Happy to discuss and talk about it.
Then let's thank
Thank you for sponsors and everything. Yeah.